The millionaire marched up the cracked porch of the abandoned farmhouse, annoyed he had to inspect it personally. An elderly black woman stood blocking the doorway, leaning on her cane. He tried to brush past her, but she grabbed his sleeve. Her eyes went cold. She whispered, "Don't go. You won't come back." He stopped mid-step. Something in her voice wasn't fear. It was warning. The millionaire froze on the porch. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. Adrian Cole stepped out of the sleek black SUV like he owned the whole damn horizon. Technically, he owned pieces of it. Enough, anyway. He smoothed the hand over the front of his tailored jacket, the kind of dark fabric that made the dust of the rural road look even more out of place on his shoes. The driver closed the door behind him, the click sounding too clean for this town. Out here, most noises were softer, slower, creaking wood, rattling screen doors, trucks coughing to life. He barely noticed. His eyes were already locked on the house. The old farmhouse sat at the end of a long, rutted drive, half swallowed by tall grass and wild weeds. Its paint had surrendered long ago, peeling in thin curls, gray boards exposed to years of wind and rain. One of the upstairs windows was cracked, a jagged line through dirty glass, like the house had once tried to scream and frozen in the attempt. Adrian stared at it, not with fear, not with awe, just calculation. He lifted his phone, tapping through an email with the property's numbers. 3 acres, a laughably low auction price, no existing mortgage, no nearby competition. The plan was simple: flatten the place, rezone the land, sell it to some city family craving a country escape with a prefab modern box and wide windows for sunset photos. Quick permit, fresh marketing, double the investment. Easy. He turned, surveying the town from where he stood. A modest main street in the distance, a handful of houses scattered along the road, a faded gas station a mile back where he'd stopped for coffee that tasted like burnt regret. People here moved slow, talked slow, lived small. He'd blown past small a long time ago. "Mr. Cole?" the driver asked softly, staying respectfully near the car. "You want me to wait here or take the truck back to the motel?" Adrian said without looking at him. "I'll call when I'm done. Won't be long." "Yes, sir." The SUV rolled away, tires crunching over gravel, leaving Adrian alone with the wind, the field, and the farmhouse. The air was warm, heavy with late summer heat, but as he started walking up the drive, he felt a faint chill skim the back of his neck. He frowned, rolled his shoulders, and kept going. On either side of the drive, fields stretched out, half wild. In the distance, a few kids on bikes rode past, laughing, their voices carrying. As they neared the farmhouse, though, their bikes slowed. One of them glanced toward Adrian, then toward the house, then shook his head quickly and pedaled faster, veering away. The others followed. They didn't come near the property line. Adrian smirked. "Cute," he muttered to himself. "Haunted house, small town edition." His shoes sank slightly into tufts of dry grass as he walked, dust smearing faintly against the polished leather. He checked the time. This was supposed to be a quick inspection, a confirmation of what the photos already told him. Foundation shot, roof buckling, interior trashed. Perfect excuse to level it. Somewhere behind him, a dog barked. The sound echoed once, then abruptly cut off, like the animal had reached an invisible line and refused to cross it. Adrian reached the edge of the front yard and stopped, eyeing the porch. Boards warped, some missing entirely. one hanging off to the side like a broken tooth. An old swing chain hung from the overhang, its seat long gone, metal links swaying slightly in a breeze he couldn't feel. The air was still, too still. He took a step forward, then paused. The front door slammed, loud. The sound cracked across the yard like a gunshot, rattling the porch windows. Adrian jerked his head up. The door had been ajar a moment ago in the listing photos he'd scrolled through that morning. He could have sworn it was slightly open when he stepped out of the car. Now, it was tight shut. He felt a flicker of something, not quite fear, just a ripple of annoyance at the jump in his own chest. Loose hinges, he muttered. Wind. Old wood. He glanced around, as if daring someone to challenge the logic. No one did. The road in front of the property was quiet. But as he scanned it, he noticed something he hadn't before. Across the dirt road, a woman sat on a porch in a weathered rocking chair. Straight-backed, small-framed, wrapped in a pale cardigan despite the heat. Her dark skin was lined with age, her gray hair pulled back neatly. A cane rested against the arm of her chair. She wasn't fidgeting, wasn't reading, wasn't scrolling a phone. She was watching him. Adrian met her gaze for half a second. She didn't look away. He broke the eye contact first, more irritated than he'd admit, and kept moving toward the house. He passed the rusted mailbox without looking at it closely, just another piece of junk to be ripped out later. If he had looked, really looked, he might have noticed the fate letters beneath the rust. The ones someone had scratched there with something sharp. His last name. Cole. He didn't see it. Not yet. He stepped closer to the porch, and the temperature dipped again. A cold thread of air slid under his collar, raising goosebumps along his arms. It made no sense. The sky was bright, the field shimmered with heat, and his shirt clung lightly to his back where the sun had warmed it. He exhaled sharply, forcing away the chill. "You're not 12, he told himself, under his breath. It's wood and nails, not a horror movie. He put one foot on the first porch step. Behind him, a voice called out. Clear. Firm. That house remembers what it took. Adrian turned. The old woman from across the road was no longer seated. She stood now at the edge of her yard, one hand gripping her cane, the other hanging loose at her side. She hadn't raised her voice much, but the words carried cleanly through the warm air. He stared at her, irritation tugging at the edges of his composure. "Excuse me," he called back. She didn't move closer, didn't smile, didn't look impressed by him or his expensive watch or his perfectly pressed shirt. She just repeated, slower this time. That house remembers what it took. He let out a humorless chuckle. "I'm sure it does," he said. "Water damage, termites, maybe a raccoon or two. I'll take it from here." He turned back toward the door, but the sentence stuck to him like a burr. What it took. He shrugged it off. Stories. Superstition. Every small town had some old property wrapped in ghost tales and whispered warnings. Made kids behave. Gave adults something to talk about at diners. He'd heard versions of it in half the rural areas he'd done business in. Never mattered. Never stopped him. He reached for the doorknob, only to notice the lock for the first time. Or what was left of it. The metal was bent outward, twisted like someone, or something, had forced its way from the inside out. Wood around the lock was splintered, fragments pushed onto the porch instead of inside the threshold. Adrian paused, fingers hovering just above the cool metal. That's odd. A normal break-in busted the door inward. Not this. He knelt closer, tracing one edge of the bent lock. Behind him, a faint wind stirred, threading through the tall grass and sweeping across the yard. The porch swing chain clinked softly, metal tapping metal with a slow, irregular rhythm. He straightened, suddenly very aware of how alone he was on the property. He glanced back at the road. The kids on bikes were gone. The dog wasn't barking. No cars passed. Only Miss Louise Carter, though he didn't know her name yet, remained, her eyes never leaving him. He turned away from her, jaw tightening. You came here to do a job. Do it. He moved along the porch, footsteps testing each board. Near the side of the house, he noticed something else. Leaves. A faint trail of them, scattered but strangely consistent, starting from the tree line and leading straight to the back door. It hadn't been windy. The leaves weren't spread everywhere. Just there, like something had been dragged or walked through them recently. Adrian frowned, following the trail with his eyes. The back door sat slightly crooked on its hinges, wood darker around the edges, as if touched by old smoke or water. He rubbed his knuckles along his jaw. You're letting this place get in your head. He straightened his shoulders, smoothing his shirt one more time, and walked back around to the front, ignoring the twist in his gut, ignoring the cold that didn't belong in summer, ignoring the way the old woman's voice still curled around his thoughts like smoke. That house remembers what it took. He rolled his eyes toward the sky, exhaling hard. Ghosts didn't pay mortgages. Fear didn't sign deals. Superstition didn't double property values. Whatever stories this town whispered at night, whatever shadows stretched long across this porch when the sun dipped, none of it mattered. He'd come here to enter that house, and no fragile, shaky little warning from the stranger on a porch was going to stop him. Not yet. Something shifted in the air the moment Adrian committed to walking back toward the front door. A subtle tension, like the world took a quiet breath and held it. He didn't notice it consciously. Not at first. He was too busy mentally reviewing the demolition timeline, already imagining the clean slate the land would offer once this rotted thing was leveled. But the feeling was there all the same. A faint pressure at the base of his skull, a creeping awareness that the property felt wrong. Or maybe he told himself it was just small-town nonsense rubbing off on him. He stopped beside the rusted mailbox again. He hadn't looked closely at it before, just dismissed it as junk. But now something made him pause. In the midday light, the rust shimmered in uneven shades of brown and orange. Beneath it, faint lines caught his eye. Scratches. Not random ones either. He dipped his head, squinting. Letters. Cole. His own last name. Scratched harshly into the metal, as though carved with fury or desperation. He froze, breath stalling for half a second. No, he muttered. Coincidence. But his voice lacked conviction. He ran one finger lightly along the grooves. They were deep. Deeper than a casual prank or careless scrape. Whoever made them pressed hard, carving each line with intention. He stepped back from the mailbox a little faster than he meant to. The air pressed cold against the back of his neck again. He swallowed, hard, then forced himself to keep walking. The porch groaned under his weight as he stepped up. The boards felt damp somehow. Though the sun was blazing, he wiped his palm on his jacket, annoyed at the clammy sensation. He reached for the doorknob again. This time, before he touched it, a flicker of movement tugged his attention. The lock, twisted outward, metal buckled like it had been forced from inside. He had seen break-ins before, trespassers, squatters. None of those left marks like this. He leaned closer, tilting his head. The splintered wood radiated outward in jagged lines, but the interior wood, the side facing inside the house, looked untouched. His brows lowered. How the hell? A sudden rustle snapped his attention to the yard. A gust of wind swept across the dry grass with a low whispering sound. But the air around him stayed cold, while the field danced under the heat. He scanned the yard quickly. That's when he saw it. A faint trail of leaves, still undisturbed, snaking across the grass from the tree line behind the house toward the back door. He hadn't imagined it earlier, and now, under the right angle of sunlight, he could see the pattern clearly. Something had moved through there recently. Something heavier than the wind. He took in a breath that didn't quite reach his lungs. Animals, he said out loud. A deer or something. But the trail was too straight, too deliberate. He stepped off the porch and followed it with his eyes. The leaves were cracked, broken, and some pressed deeper into the ground, like a weight had settled there. He followed the trail halfway across the yard before stopping. The back door was slightly ajar. Just slightly, like someone had pushed it open with the softest touch, or like something inside wanted out, but only a little. He shuddered, shook it off sharply, and turned away. Miss Carter was still across the road, watching him. Only now she was standing closer to her fence line, her expression unreadable. Not angry, not afraid. Regret? Maybe. He hated that. He didn't want to see anything human reflected back at him. Especially not in a town full of people he didn't care about. But her eyes felt like a mirror he wasn't ready to look into. He raised his chin slightly, pretending he hadn't been shaken. What are you looking at? He muttered under his breath as he walked back toward the porch. Brad, as if in response, her voice carried across the still air. That house remembers what it took. He stiffened. He didn't turn around. He didn't ask again. He just kept walking back to the steps. A long, hollow creak echoed as he stepped on the first board. It sagged under his weight, like it recognized him, or mistook him for someone else. He ascended to the porch, his footsteps strangely loud in the quiet. A faint breeze cut across him again, colder this time. Too cold. Instant goosebumps prickled down his arms. The temperature dropped enough that he could see his breath for a split second before it vanished in the warm air. His stomach tightened. That shouldn't be possible in August. He rubbed his arms briskly, stepping back toward the front door again. The handle glinted in the sunlight. The broken lock sat twisted like a warning. The boards beneath his feet felt colder, softer, like the wood was rotting faster under him than anywhere else, period. He reached for the doorknob. Something slammed inside the house, hard. A single thunderous bang, like a fist hitting a wall, or a door crashing against a frame. Adrian jerked his hand back instinctively, heart thudding once in his chest before he could stop it. He stared at the door, jaw clenched. "Raccoon," he said firmly. "Some animal trapped inside." Even he didn't believe that. He took a step back. Another cold breeze, sharp, slicing, shot across the porch. Whipping his hair back, the porch swing chain clinked once, twice. Lights flickered inside. The house wasn't hooked up to electricity. His pulse betrayed him, a quick, strong jolt. He spun on his heel, scanning the empty road. Not a single passing car. Kids vanished. No bark from the dog down the lane. No birds overhead. Even the wind felt like it was circling him, not the house. The old woman's gaze burned into him from across the road. Her voice carried again, steadier now. That house took a man before, and it kept him. He stared at her. Her face didn't shift. Her hands gripped the top of her cane, knuckles white. He finally snapped. "Lady, I don't care if the damn house eats shadows or glows in the dark. I bought it. I own it. I decide what happens to it." She didn't flinch. That's what he said too. He opened his mouth, ready to lash back, but no words came. A bead of sweat slid down his spine. He ignored it. He turned his attention firmly to the farmhouse door. If he let an old woman with ghost stories scare him, he'd never respect himself again, and the boardroom sharks sure as hell never would. He reached for the doorknob again. His fingers brushed the metal. The wood under his feet groaned, as though responding. Behind him, footsteps echoed faintly, shuffling, slow. Miss Carter was walking toward the edge of the road now. Her voice cracked the air. "Don't go." He didn't turn. "Don't go," she repeated, louder this time. A third time, barely above a whisper, but somehow unmistakable. "You won't come back." Her words wrapped around him like a breath of winter. Adrian swallowed, throat tight. But pride rose stronger than fear. He steadied his jaw, set his shoulder, and closed his hand fully around the doorknob. Nothing on earth was going to stop him now. Nothing. Not superstition. Not a rusted mailbox. Not a cold breeze in August. Not an old woman with warnings. He pushed the door, and the house seemed to inhale. The door groaned open like it hadn't been touched in decades. Long, slow, and unwilling. Dust lifted from the crack as if the house itself exhaled something stale into the sunlight. Adrian hesitated only a breath before stepping onto the threshold. Behind him, the crunch of gravel and a low murmur signaled movement. A few townspeople had gathered along the dirt road, drawn by Miss Carter's raised voice and the sight of the outsider at the cursed farmhouse. Their shadows stretched long across the field as they whispered among themselves. "He's going in. Oh, poor fool doesn't know. He looks just like the man from before. Lord help him." Adrian ignored all of it. Superstition, folklore, fear disguised as tradition. He'd built an empire ignoring people smaller than him. This was no different. As he drew closer to the doorway, Ms. Carter's cane slammed into the dirt with a sharp crack. He flinched despite himself. When he turned, she was already shuffling toward him. Small steps, determined, eyes fierce in a way that didn't match her frail frame. Her cardigan flapped in the strange cold breeze, though the air behind her shimmered with heat. She stopped at the base of the porch steps, breath uneven but gaze steady. "Young man," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "You don't step through that door." Adrian crossed his arms, jaw tight. "I didn't ask for advice." "It ain't advice." She angled her cane toward him. "It's a warning." He scoffed. "From who? The ghost of property value?" Nobody laughed. The small crowd behind her stood frozen, their faces pale, eyes shifting between him and the house like they were watching a funeral unfold ahead of time. Miss Carter didn't move. "Don't go," she repeated, slower this time. "You won't come back." Adrian clenched his teeth, irritation spiking under his skin. "Move aside." She took one more step, planting herself squarely in front of him. Her grip tightened on the cane. The wood trembled, not from fear, but from the effort of holding her ground. "I said," she breathed. "Don't go." He let out a sharp breath. "I own this place." Her eyes narrowed, deep, dark, glowing with something ancient and tragic. "So did your father." The world lurched sideways. Everything, the heat, the wind, the murmurs, the creaking porch, went still. Like the town held its breath, like something in the dirt quivered. Adrian froze, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. His spine locked into place. "My father?" he said, voice barely audible. Miss Carter didn't blink. "Yes." "How do you know him?" His throat tightened. "How do you know anything about him?" She slowly shook her head. "I know what happened here, and I know the look of a coal man stepping toward the door that took the last one." A few of the onlookers murmured, some crossing themselves, others backing away a step. Adrian's pulse slammed in his ears. His stomach dipped. He didn't talk about his father, ever. Not with friends, not with business partners. Everyone knew the basics. Father left when he was a boy. Disappeared. Abandoned them. He'd never been found. Adrian had buried that part of his life beneath mansions and profit margins and success. He didn't need ghosts from the past, especially not in a town he'd never set foot in before today. He steadied his voice, though a tremor threatened to break through it. "You're confused," he said coldly. "My father wasn't from here. I didn't say he was." He stared at her. She stared back. 35 years ago, she said quietly, he stood right where you stand. A wave of whispers washed through the crowd. He had the same look, the same walk. God help him. Adrian's breath hitched painfully. Sweat gathered at the base of his neck, cold against his skin. He forced a hard swallow. "Enough!" Miss Carter didn't flinch. "I tried to stop him too." His heart hammered. He took a step down the porch, closing the distance between them by one board. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know what I saw." "Then you're lying." "I wish I was." Something dark flickered behind her eyes. Something he couldn't name, but felt like dread. The crowd continued to grow, people drifting closer, drawn by the tension thickening in the air. One man whispered loudly, "Tell him, Louise." A young woman shook her head. "He won't listen." "None of the Coles do." Adrian's chest tightened. His hands curled into fists. "I'm done with this," he snapped. "Move." Miss Carter lifted her cane, holding it horizontally like a barrier, as if she could physically stop him, as if she had that kind of strength. "You step past this point," she said, voice lowered to a trembling whisper, "and you won't leave as you came." His anger boiled. "Lady," she cut him off, voice cracking like a whip through the heavy air. "That house took him." The words slapped the breath out of him. He blinked. "What?" he whispered. "The house took your father," she said, "and it won't let go of you either." His legs felt unsteady, his stomach twisted, his mouth went dry. The porch beneath him moaned again, a long, deep groan, as though the house recognized the moment. He stepped back without meaning to, heart thudding against his ribs. Miss Carter's grip tightened. Her knuckles went white. "Please," she said, the first time her voice had cracked with pleading instead of warning. "Don't go in." Something about the word please pierced him harder than any threat. But pride, the same pride that had built his empire and ruined half his relationships, clawed through his fear. "You're wrong," he forced out. "You're all wrong." He turned sharply, shoving her cane aside. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to break the invisible barrier she'd planted between him and the door. Gasps rippled behind him. Miss Carter stumbled a half step, pain flickering through her eyes, not from the shove, but from the moment she knew she had lost him. "You don't want the answer in there," she whispered. He didn't turn back. He didn't let himself. He put his hand on the doorknob. He pushed the door open wide, and he stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly, an unnatural cold blooming up his spine like frost climbing a window pane. The house swallowed the light. The door swung behind him and slammed shut with the force of something alive. The world outside the farmhouse dissolved behind Adrian the moment the door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the hollow structure, bouncing off unseen walls and twisting into something almost like a breath. For a split second, he stood frozen, fingers still on the doorknob, his heart hammering so hard it shook his ribs. The air inside was thick, stale, wrong, like the house had been sealed shut for far longer than its peeling windows suggest. Dust motes floated in thin shafts of light slicing through the broken boards. The floor creaked under his shoes, long abandoned wood shifting reluctantly around him. He forced a breath. In and out, he muttered to himself. Document the damage, make the call, get it demolished. His voice sounded small in the empty dark. He turned toward the foyer, trying to let logic overpower the fear buzzing beneath his skin. Then a truck engine growled outside. The sound broke the silence like a warning. Adrian spun around and pulled the door open again. The daylight hit him so suddenly it hurt his eyes. Outside, a dusty sheriff's truck, old but well-maintained, rolled to a stop at the edge of the property. The driver's door opened with a creak, and a tall, broad man stepped out. Retired now, that much was obvious from his posture, but still carrying himself with the heavy authority of someone who'd worn a badge for decades. Sheriff Howard Briggs. Adrian had never met him, but Briggs recognized him instantly. He froze on the gravel, eyes widening with a mix of shock and something like sorrow. "Cole?" he breathed. "Adrian Cole?" Adrian stiffened. "Yeah, you know me?" Briggs slowly removed his hat, holding it to his chest. "I knew your father." The words landed like a punch. Adrian's throat went tight. His heartbeat stumbled. "My father?" he managed. "What are you talking about?" "He disappeared when I was a kid." The sheriff's eyes darkened. "Son, he disappeared here, at this house." A cold spike shot down Adrian's spine. Impossible. His father's disappearance had been a closed wound, sealed by silence and bitterness. He'd always believed the man simply walked away, ran from responsibilities, from debt, from a broken marriage, from him. Never once had he imagined this place had anything to do with it. Briggs took a step closer. "You look just like him. Same jaw." Adrian swallowed hard. "How do you know all this?" Instead of answering, Briggs reached inside the truck and pulled out a worn folder, corners bent, edges frayed, a deep crease down the middle from being folded too many times. He held it out cautiously, like offering someone a loaded weapon. Adrian didn't want to take it. He took it anyway. The moment the folder touched his hands, the weight of decades pressed into his palms, making his fingers tremble. "Go on," Briggs said quietly. "Open it." Adrian flipped the cover. There it was. Missing person report, Michael Cole, age 31, last seen Carter County, rural outskirts. Last location, abandoned farmhouse. His father's name, his father's face staring back at him from a yellowed photo. Adrian's heartbeat faltered. He scanned the next page. Police notes. Entered property alone. Locals reported unusual noises. Door found open, but no sign of struggle. Multiple sightings of light in second-floor window despite no electricity. His breath went shallow. He flipped another page, clipped photos of the same farmhouse he was standing in front of now. Same porch, same broken swing chain, same boarded windows. A note at the bottom. Evidence points to voluntary entry. Final sighting by L. Carter. Adrian's head snapped up. Miss Carter saw him? Briggs nodded. She tried to stop him, like she tried to stop you. A sick weight settled in Adrian's gut. Briggs stepped closer, dropping his voice. She was the last person to see your father alive. Alive? Adrian repeated, voice cracking. You think he died here? The sheriff's jaw tightened. I think, he looked toward the house, that this place took things from people. Things we couldn't explain. Things we didn't want to explain. Adrian's breath shuddered in his chest. This is insane. It wasn't just your father, Briggs continued. 3 others vanished here in the decades before him. All men. All alone. Adrian felt dizzy. Why didn't anyone tell me? Briggs sighed heavily. Your mother made us close the file. She didn't want you growing up with this hanging over your head. She asked us to bury everything. So we did. Anger, grief, confusion, all of it collided inside him, twisting his insides. So all my life, Adrian said, voice shaking, I thought he abandoned us. Briggs lowered his hat again. No, son. Your father came here looking for something, and he never came back. The wind picked up suddenly, sharp and cold, swirling dirt across the ground between them. Miss Carter stepped closer from her porch, her cane tapping slowly as she joined them. I warned him, she whispered. Same way I warned you. Adrian's hands tightened around the folder until the edges dug into his skin. This is insane, he repeated, but the words were losing strength. You're both insane. Briggs shook his head. I wish we were. Adrian swallowed hard, lashes trembling. So what do I do? Briggs hesitated. Leave. Miss Carter's voice cracked. Before the house knows you're here. A chill shot up Adrian's spine. He looked from the sheriff to the old woman, then back toward the open doorway behind him. Something inside the house shifted. He felt it. Deep, slow. A presence awakened. His pulse spiked. Fear clawed up his throat, primal and undeniable. But pride, that cursed pride, shoved its way through everything else. He straightened his shoulders. No, I'm going inside. I'm finding out what happened to him. Don't, Miss Carter begged, voice trembling. Briggs slammed his hand against the hood of his truck. Son, listen to her. But Adrian was already turning toward the doorway, already stepping inside, already crossing the same threshold his father had crossed 35 years earlier. The air swallowed him again, and the house seemed to recognize him. The moment Adrian stepped fully into the house, the air changed, thickened, darkened, coiled around him like something had been waiting. His breath fogged in front of him, a faint, ghostly mist rising into the dimness. Summer heat outside, winter breath inside. He rubbed his arms instinctively and scanned the entryway. The foyer stretched before him, narrow walls, faded wallpaper peeling away in long, brittle strips. Dust coated everything like ash. The wooden floor bowed inward in places, as though the house had been holding too much weight for too long. A strange silence filled the room. Not quiet. Silence. Like the air itself refused to carry sound. He stepped forward. The house groaned. Low. Deep. Like an animal roused from sleep. Dad? He whispered before realizing what he'd said. His voice evaporated instantly. No echo. Just swallowed. He cleared his throat and forced himself deeper inside. The living room opened to his left, furnished, unexpectedly. He had assumed the place would be empty, gutted by time. But the furniture was still there. A rocking chair near the fireplace. A low wooden table. A couch draped with a thin, gray sheet. Everything coated in dust, except the floor near the table. There, faint footprints tracked across the room. Adrian froze. He knelt down, brushing his fingers over one of the prints. The dust had been disturbed recently, the edges crisp, the center darker. Someone had been there, not decades ago, days, maybe hours. His pulse thudded. "Anyone home?" he called, louder. Nothing. He forced himself toward the dining room. He pushed open the swinging door and stopped dead. The table was set, freshly, not dusty, not old, not abandoned. A clean white tablecloth, 2 plates, 2 sets of silverware, 2 glasses filled with clear water, perfectly arranged, as if someone had been expecting company. Adrian's heartbeat pounded so violently it hurt. "No," he breathed. "No, this is staged. This is someone's sick joke." He stepped closer to the table, reaching for the nearest plate. His fingertips hovered an inch above it. The water in the glasses rippled. Once, twice, then stilled. He jerked his hand back. Something about this house felt watching, listening, waiting. His gaze drifted toward a coat rack near the archway. An old brown coat hung there, heavy wool, frayed at the sleeves. He didn't want to touch it. He didn't want to recognize it. But he did. His father had owned a coat like this. Identical. He stepped closer, fingers trembling, and brushed the fabric lightly. Not dusty. Someone had worn it. Recently. A violent shudder rippled through him as he backed away. "Dad," he whispered again, unable to stop himself. The house creaked above him. He slowly turned to the staircase, where the railing leaned like a tired spine. Dust drifted down as though something had moved upstairs. He swallowed hard, then forced himself to check the lower rooms before going up. He stepped into the old den and froze. A set of footprints, fresh, clearer than the ones before, led straight into the center of the room and stopped abruptly. Stopped. No turn, no direction, no exit. Just ended, as though the person had vanished mid-step. His chest tightened. Panic fluttered in his throat. He stumbled out of the room and into the hallway, where the wallpaper curled like peeling skin. A faint clicking noise pulled his eyes toward a small wooden desk near the wall. A camera sat there, old, black, heavy, the kind that used physical film. His father used to own one. His father used to take pictures of everything. Landscapes, houses, random objects, always documenting, always searching for something. Adrian reached out and picked up the camera with shaking hands. It was cracked, one corner smashed. Dried mud clung to the bottom. He turned it over. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film. He almost dropped it when he realized. His father's last camera. He clutched it tight against his chest for a moment, his breathing ragged. A lifetime of anger, of abandonment, resentment, blame, cracked and twisted into something entirely different. Grief. Real grief. For a man he thought had walked out, instead of a man who had been trapped, taken, lost. He placed the camera gently on the desk, afraid to damage it further. When he stepped back, his heel pressed against something. Crunch. He looked down. A huge old photograph lay half concealed under dust and broken plaster. He lifted it. It was a faded image of the farmhouse's original owners, a family of 4 standing stiffly in front of the home. Their eyes were dark, their expressions hollow, but one detail froze his blood. Standing beside them, slightly blurred, one hand resting on the shoulder of the man, was his father. The same coat, the same jawline, the same look in his eyes that Adrian saw in the mirror every morning. "No," Adrian whispered, voice cracking. "No, this has to be doctored. This has to be." He stared harder. The edges of the photo shimmered faintly, as though reacting to his presence. The faces seemed to shift subtly, not changing, but remembering. The air behind him stirred. A whisper, faint, distant, like breath sliding through old plaster. "Leave." Adrian spun around, dropping the photo. His heart slammed against his ribs, hard enough to bruise. "Who's there?" he shouted, panic breaking through his arrogance. The whisper swelled, filling the room, layered and echoing. "Leave." The temperature plunged. His breath fogged in front of his face. The wooden floor vibrated beneath his feet, alive, trembling, warning. He stumbled backward toward the door, slipping on dust. "No, no," he gasped, chest heaving. "Dad? Dad?" But the house didn't answer. The whisper faded into a low, humming growl. The kind that vibrated in the bones rather than in the air. Adrian bolted toward the exit, gripping the doorframe to steady himself. He glanced back once, and the table set for two looked wrong now, like the plates were shifted, like the chairs had moved, like the house was preparing for him. He ran, bursting through the foyer, shoving the front door open with both hands. The hot summer air slammed into him like a lifeline. He stumbled onto the porch, gasping, gripping the railing with both hands until his knuckles turned. Behind him, the door thudded shut, softly, almost politely, like a warning left unfinished. Adrian staggered off the porch, like a man escaping a burning building. His breath came in sharp bursts, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The heat outside slammed into him, a jarring contrast to the icy tremor that had sunk deep beneath his skin inside the house. Sweat streamed down his face, but he still felt cold. Cold in a way no sun could warm. He stumbled forward, boots sliding on loose dirt. Before his knees buckled, he hit the ground hard. Dust curled up around him in a soft cloud. Somewhere behind him, the old porch creaked as if something heavy shifted its weight inside. He pressed a palm to his chest, trying to steady his breathing. What the hell?" he rasped, voice cracking under the strain. "Dad?" The folder Sheriff Briggs had given him slipped from his grasp and scattered across the yard, pages fluttering in the breeze. His father's photo landed face up beside him, staring at him with that same unresolved expression Adrian had spent his life resenting. Adrian grabbed the picture with shaking fingers and clutched it to his chest. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the image of the table set for two, the footprints stopping mid-step, the whisper in the walls, all of it burned behind his eyelids. He gagged once, fighting to keep his stomach stable. His entire body vibrated with confusion, anger, fear, emotions he had trained himself for decades to bury beneath profit margins and cold logic. Then a soft, slow tapping approached. Tap, tap. He opened his eyes. Ms. Louise Carter was kneeling beside him. For a frail woman, she moved with startling strength and urgency. Her cane lay discarded a few feet away in the dirt. Her hands, thin, wrinkled, gently cupped his face, guiding his frantic gaze to hers. "Now you understand," she whispered, voice warm but weighted with sorrow. "Now you see it." Adrian's breath hitched. What is that place?" he choked. I heard." She stroked his cheek once, a gesture so motherly it almost broke him. "That house took from you," she said softly. "Same as it took from him. Same as it took from the family before him." He shook his head violently. "No, no! That doesn't make sense. None of this is real." Her grip tightened, surprising him with its strength. "Boy," she snapped, finally letting her own fear slip through. "You tell me that after what you seen?" His mouth opened, but the truth stuck in his throat. He couldn't deny what he experienced. He couldn't unsee the footprints. He couldn't unhear the whisper. He couldn't unfeel the cold breath crawling up his spine. "No," he whispered, voice breaking. "No, it can't be real." Ms. Carter sat back on her heels, her own breath uneven. She looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like she'd carried this weight for decades. "Your father didn't abandon you," she said gently. The words crashed into him like a tidal wave. Tears sprang to his eyes, fast, hot, uninvited. He turned away, wiping them angrily. "Stop," he said through clenched teeth. "Just stop." But the old woman didn't. She'd held this truth for 35 years. She wasn't stopping now. "He came to that house looking for answers," she continued. "He came because he suspected the same thing that took the family before him." Adrian's heart hammered. What did they find? Miss Carter hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because saying it carried its own danger. "The house kept secrets," she said finally. "Dark ones, violent ones. People tried to cover 'em up. Developers, landmen, folks that wanted the truth buried deeper than the foundation." Her voice shook. "And when your father got close, the house didn't let him leave." Adrian stared at her, horror widening his eyes. "But that doesn't make sense. A house can carry what's been done in it," she interrupted firmly. "A house can remember, and sometimes it can hold on." His breath hitched. "Hold on to what?" "To the truth," she whispered. "And to the people who get too close to it." He squeezed his eyes shut again, his father's image flashing behind his eyelids. The coat, the photograph, the footprints, the set table, the whisper. He felt sick. Sheriff Briggs approached slowly, boots crunching on gravel. His face was grim, respectful. "You should have listened," he said quietly. Adrian wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he cried out, a painful edge in his voice. "Why did I grow up thinking he left us?" Briggs sighed heavily. "Your mother made me seal the file. She didn't want you carrying something this heavy. ... She lied to me," Adrian whispered. "All my life." "She was protecting you," Miss Carter said gently. "From what?" he snapped, voice cracking. "From knowing the house killed him? You think that's better?" Miss Carter placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "From becoming him." The words hit him harder than anything else. A long silence settled between them, broken only by the wind rustling through the grass and the distant groan of the farmhouse settling. Adrian finally lifted his gaze to the porch, to the doorway he'd just escaped. He shuddered violently. He had never been afraid of anything in his life. Not failure, not risk, not ruin, not enemies. But he was terrified now. Terrified because he believed them. For the first time in his adult life, arrogance cracked, and something raw and childlike took its place. Fear, grief, truth. He clutched his father's photo against his chest, fingers trembling. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why now? Why did the house react like that? Miss Carter met his eyes. Because it knows who you are. Briggs nodded slowly. It recognized your bloodline. Adrian's entire body went cold. So, what do I do? He whispered. You leave, Briggs said firmly. You don't take another step inside. You don't tempt it again. And you don't ignore what your father left behind, Miss Carter added softly. What? What did he leave? Miss Carter hesitated, then pointed toward the upstairs window of the farmhouse. Something shifted behind the cracked glass. A shadow, a flicker. Adrian's breath choked in his throat. What did he leave? He repeated, voice trembling. Miss Carter's voice dropped to a whisper. Proof. He stared at her, confused, terrified. No, he whispered. I'm not going back in there. Miss Carter nodded slowly. Then the house will never let him rest. His heart stopped. What does that mean? That you need to face what he tried to expose, she whispered. And the only place that truth lives, she looked at the house, is in there. Adrian's breath shuddered. His throat tightened. He had reached his breaking point. Terrified, shaking, desperate. But he knew one thing with absolute, bone-deep certainty. He had to go back inside, whether he wanted to or not. The world around Adrian felt muted, as if sound itself had backed away from him. Sheriff Briggs and Miss Carter stood close, but not too close, like they both understood that the breaking point he'd reached wasn't something they could pull him out of physically. He had to climb out of this one on his own. Adrian inhaled shakily, still kneeling in the dirt. The farmhouse loomed behind him like a witness. Its shadow stretched long across the yard, swallowing his feet, creeping up his legs, claiming him. Miss Carter eased herself onto the porch step, exhaling softly as her bones settled. You don't have to go in alone this time, she said gently. Briggs nodded, stepping beside her. We're with you, son. We've carried this truth too long. Adrian pressed his palm over his eyes, then dragged it down his face. Why? He whispered. Why would my father even come here? Briggs looked at the house and sighed. A deep, soul-heavy sound. Because he got close to the truth about the people who owned this land before. Real close. Too close. Miss Carter tapped her cane on the ground, her voice steady but tinged with old hurt. Long before you were born, that family in the photograph, they vanished. Not just gone, erased. Adrian stared at her, a deep frown knitting across his face. Erased? Developers, she said. Powerful ones. The kind that didn't like the word no. This town was smaller then, even poorer. Folks didn't fight back. They couldn't. Briggs stepped forward, rubbing the edge of his thumb along the rim of his hat. They wanted the land. The original family refused. There was a feud, a violent one. Then one day, the whole family vanished, just like that. Adrian's chest tightened. And no one did anything? Briggs's jaw flexed. Son, you don't cross giants when you're an ant. Miss Carter nodded. People talked. Whispers. But whispers don't stand up in court. Briggs continued, voice low. Your father, he was stubborn. Good stubborn. Wanted answers. Didn't trust the story. Didn't trust the silence. So he came out here. Took photos. Briggs nodded toward the farmhouse. Went digging. Miss Carter shook her head slowly. The house didn't kill him the way you think. Her gaze slid toward the broken upstairs window. It kept him. Adrian's breath caught. Why? Because he found proof, Briggs said. Proof the developers covered up everything. Proof the family didn't just disappear. They were taken. And the ones who did it buried the truth under this house. Adrian's pulse pounded. Proof of what exactly? Briggs nodded toward the farmhouse. Inside that box your father left, he wrote everything down. Adrian's heart twisted. The metal box upstairs, the one he hadn't opened yet. Sheriff Briggs knelt beside him. He tried to leave, son. I know he did. Door was wide open when we came to find him. But some truths, they get a grip on you. And once a house carries that kind of truth, he shook his head. It doesn't let go easily. Adrian closed his eyes for a long moment, long enough for the wind to shift, lifting dirt into small spirals around them. Finally, he opened them. I have to go back in, he whispered. Miss Carter touched his arm gently. You don't have to do it alone. He nodded. Together, the three of them walked up the porch steps. The door didn't resist this time. It groaned open slowly, as if it recognized the truth-bearers who'd finally come to claim what was owed. Inside, the house felt colder, but calmer. The air crackled with awareness, but not hostility. Almost like it sensed something different now. Something resolved. They stepped softly across the foyer, past the footprints that ended abruptly in the den, past the table set for two, now still, no longer shifting in the corner of Adrian's vision. Upstairs, the temperature dropped again. Briggs placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder. You okay? No, Adrian whispered. But I'm ready. They reached the master bedroom, the one Adrian hadn't explored yet. Dust coated every surface, except for the bedside table. He saw it immediately. The metal box, small, rusted, but intact. Miss Carter motioned with her chin. Go on. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the box into his lap. It felt too heavy for its size, like regret, like truth. He worked the latch open. It clicked softly. Inside were three items. His father's old watch, cracked but still ticking faintly, impossibly. A torn photo of Adrian as a baby, his father holding him, smiling. A folded letter, yellowed with age, addressed in his father's handwriting. To my son. Adrian's throat closed instantly. He unfolded the letter with shaking hands. My son, if you are reading this, the house did not let me leave. His breath hitched. Briggs and Miss Carter remained silent, giving him space. Adrian continued reading. I came here because I knew something was wrong. People lied, people died, and I could not let it stay buried. His hands trembled violently. I found evidence they hurt this family, that they buried the truth beneath this land. I tried to bring it to the sheriff. I tried to get out. A tear dropped from Adrian's cheek onto the page. But the house knew I was close. It held me. It kept me. Not out of cruelty, but because the truth wasn't ready yet. Adrian bit down hard on his lip to keep from sobbing. I want you to know this. I never left you. I never abandoned you. I never stopped loving you. His vision blurred. I hope one day, when you are strong enough, you will finish what I started. Tell the truth, free this house, and let me rest. The letter ended with a trembling signature. Michael Cole Adrian crushed the letter against his chest and broke. The kind of break he'd never allowed himself before. His shoulders shook, his breathing cracked. Years of anger, blame, loneliness, misunderstanding spilled out of him in raw, ragged sobs. Ms. Carter moved to him, settling beside him on the bed. She let him cry, rubbing slow circles into his back with her thin, warm hand. Briggs looked away, giving him dignity, but the sheriff's own jaw trembled with emotion. When Adrian finally lifted his head, tears streaking down his face, He whispered, "He didn't leave me." "No," Miss Carter said gently. "He fought for you. He fought for this town. And now it's your turn." Adrian wiped his face, but his voice was steadier now. "What do we do next?" Briggs stepped forward, nodding decisively. "We take everything, the box, the documents, the photographs, straight to the authorities. Not the local ones. Higher." Adrian nodded. "Good. And then?" Miss Carter asked. Adrian looked around the eerie, hollow room. The shadows, the cold, the weight of decades. Then he looked at the letter in his hands. "We tell the truth," he said firmly. "All of it." He walked downstairs, the box under his arm, Ms. Carter and Briggs beside him like guardians. When he crossed the threshold, a hot breeze suddenly swept through the yard, warm again, natural again. And behind him, for the first time since he arrived, the house was silent, not watching, not waiting, finally still. The truth had been heard, and the house was letting go. 2 weeks later, the farmhouse stood at the center of a transformation no one in the town had ever expected. Not destruction, not demolition, not erasure, restoration. Slow, careful, respectful restoration. The kind that felt less like construction and more like healing. The kind that honored the people who suffered here, not the ones who tried to profit from it. Workers moved gently across the property, speaking in lowered voices, as if the land itself deserved a softer tone. Old boards were cataloged, carefully lifted, and assessed. Archaeologists and state investigators combed the soil. Historical officers recorded every scrap of evidence Adrian's father had uncovered before he vanished. It wasn't about redevelopment anymore. It was about truth. Adrian stood a few yards away, arms crossed, gaze steady. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. No luxury watch, no expensive jacket, no polished shoes. He looked smaller, quieter, but in a way that meant stronger, like the weight he'd carried his whole life had finally cracked open. The sun dipped low, casting a gold wash across the farmhouse. The breeze was warm today, actually warm, not the unnatural chill the house used to breathe. Peace. He could feel it. One of the workers passed by him, offering a respectful nod. "Beautiful place," the man said. "Sad history. Glad someone's telling it now." Adrian nodded. "It deserves it." The worker walked on. Adrian stayed. He stepped forward onto the newly reinforced porch, the boards firm and steady beneath his weight. Not rotting, not groaning, not resisting. Inside, the entryway had been cleared. Sunlight finally poured through the windows unobstructed, casting long, clean beams across the floor like blessings the house hadn't seen in decades. Adrian walked slowly through the foyer, past the living room, past the spot where he'd found the coat, the table, the footprints. The fear was gone. The house wasn't cold anymore. The silence wasn't heavy, just quiet. He moved to the entry display the restoration team had set up just for him. A glass case stood near the doorway, framed by soft lighting. Inside it, cushioned by black velvet, rested the object he'd chosen to symbolize the beginning and end of everything. His father's watch. Still cracked, still worn, still ticking faintly, like a heartbeat refusing to be forgotten. Adrian reached out and let his fingertips rest lightly on the glass. "I came here for profit," he whispered, voice low, "and instead, I found you." He swallowed. A single tear escaped the corner of his eye and slid down his cheek. Slow, quiet, deliberate. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for believing you left us." The watch ticked on. Behind him, Soft footsteps approached. Ms. Louise Carter stood in the doorway, her cane tapping gently against the floor. Her eyes were warm, the fear she once held replaced with relief. "You did right by him," she said softly. Adrian smiled faintly, wiping his cheek. "I should have listened to you earlier." "You weren't ready earlier," she replied. "Sometimes we gotta break before we can hear the truth." He nodded slowly. Briggs stepped in behind her, hands hooked into his belt, expression somber but proud. "Authorities got everything," he said. "Looks like your father was right. Developers covered up the whole thing. It's all coming out now." Adrian inhaled deeply. The truth was finally seeing daylight. Truth that had been buried under decades of silence and fear. "What happens next?" he asked. Briggs shrugged lightly. "Investigations, trials, history being corrected. Folks gonna know what really happened here." Adrian nodded. "Good." Miss Carter stepped closer, her voice gentle. "What about you, child? What happens next for you?" Adrian looked around the house slowly. The new warmth in the air, the absence of dread, the weight finally lifted. Every board, every shadow, every inch of the place felt different now. Better, alive, but in a peaceful way, not a hungry one. "I'll finish what he started," he said. "This place, it's going to be a memorial, a historical investigation center, a place where no one can bury the truth again." Miss Carter's eyes filled with tears. Pride, relief, release. "I told you not to go," she whispered. "Not to scare you, but to save you." Adrian smiled softly. "And you did." She pat his hand gently. "Your father would be proud." He looked back at the watch. "I hope so." A long silence settled between them, warming instead of chilling. A silence filled not with fear, but with peace. Adrian stepped outside, squinting into the sunlight. The farmhouse behind him no longer felt like a predator. It stood like an old man, finally allowed to rest. Workers moved around the yard, marking off areas for preservation. Investigators took final photos. The land breathed easier. The wind sifted through the grass softly, whispering through the weeds as though it too was finally free. Adrian stood on the porch and watched them work, hands in his pockets, heart lighter than it had ever been. His father hadn't left him. His father had died trying to tell the truth, and now Adrian was living to finish it. He exhaled slowly, letting the warm breeze wash over him. "Sometimes the past calls to us," he murmured, "not to haunt us, but to save us from repeating its pain." He took one last look at the watch inside the entryway, the last piece of his father he would ever hold. Then he stepped off the porch, the boards creaking softly, not groaning, not warning, just letting him go. And the house behind him stayed quiet, not because it was empty, but because for the first time in 35 years, it was finally at peace.